This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 6. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility related. So if any of the topics that I'm talking about today resonate with you, or if you just want to connect with me and say hello, you can tweet me at Fertile Friday. And if you have any comments or questions about today's podcast, please stop by and leave a comment in the show notes, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. So I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Jennifer Aldoretta. Jennifer is the CEO and founder of Groove, a charting app for women to record their fertile signs if they're using fertility awareness or if they just want to keep track of their monthly periods. Jennifer studied mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and she is a pioneer in the field of women's health. And she actually quit her job as an engineer to pursue her vision. She's passionate about the intersection of healthcare and technology and is devoted to transforming the status quo. And not only did she create this awesome Groove charting app, but she also wrote a book entitled The Cycle, which I'll be linking to in the show notes, and you should definitely check it out after you listen to the episode. The Cycle is a fantastic resource for anyone who is considering or already using the fertility awareness method, and I'm looking forward to chatting more about her book in today's episode. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jennifer to the Fertility Friday podcast. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm super excited to be involved.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here.
Definitely.
So I gave you a little bit of an intro, but maybe you could tell the listeners a bit about yourself and how you kind of got into the field of fertility awareness.
Yeah, definitely. So my transition into fertility awareness was actually pretty random. So as you mentioned, I got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, which obviously has absolutely nothing to do with women's health. So I get funny looks a lot of times when I tell people that that's what I studied and when they find out what I'm doing now. But so I was actually working as a mechanical engineer for about 2 years after I graduated. And during that time, I was on the birth control pill, and I had been since I was a teenager. And I was having a lot of issues with it. And I actually had several conversations with a really close friend of mine who at the time was in graduate school for women's studies in psychology. And she had done a lot of work with women related to hormonal health and birth control methods and things like that. And she was the one who kind of pushed me to, think about my method of choice a little bit more critically and think like, okay, well, maybe there are reasons that my body's reacting the way that it is, and kind of gave me the courage that I needed to say, okay, I think that I'm gonna try stopping the pill and find something else. And yeah, so I did it, and I was terrified, but looking back, it was definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I ended up stumbling across fertility awareness through a Google search of all things, and ended up spending about a year researching the topic, which is kind of what led me to write The Cycle. So it wasn't something that I planned to do, to write a book about the method, but I just got so invested and so passionate about the topic that's what ended up happening. So here I am.
I can totally relate. It's kind of like one of the side effects of learning about fertility awareness. You just get so incredibly excited about it that you do things like write a book or start a podcast just to tell more people about it.
I just want to tell everybody that you know about it, and people will think you're weird, but I'm totally okay with that at this point. So
well, I don't think you're weird. I think you're awesome. I really liked your book. I mean, I went through it, and I love how detailed it is. And I also love the different things that you talk about. So it's not just about fertility awareness, but also about some of the cultural issues around menstruation and some of the side effects about the pill. So I thought it was a really great kind of window into this world of fertility awareness. And
Thank you. And I feel like it kind of details my journey. So, like, all of the things that I was researching at the time were so random and, it didn't really follow a linear path. So, I wanted to, pull some of those other aspects and other things that I learned along this journey into the book, too. So,
Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned a little bit about what pulled you away from taking the pill. You kind of, and I know you talked a little bit about it in your book about the kind of relationship that you had with the pill. Did you want to talk a little bit about what that was like and kind of why that led you to look for a different type of birth control method?
yeah. So, my relationship with the pill ended up being pretty tumultuous. So, I started taking it when I was probably about 15, maybe a little bit younger, 14 or 15. Because when I was growing up, even like from my very first period, I had horrible, horrible cramps, like severe, severe dysmenorrhea. And like we're talking like vomiting, like diarrhea, like all sorts of awful, awful things that I experienced every single month when I got my period. And it was just so, so excruciating. And, growing up, I feel like I was kind of led to believe that the pill was, the way that you fix stuff like that. So, naturally, I went to the doctor and told her about all of these things, and the pill was suggested, and I never questioned it. So, on the pill I went, and on the pill I stayed for about 10 years after that. And it wasn't, I didn't really have any bad side effects with it until I was in college. And, looking back, it may have been a mix of just, the stresses of going to school full time and trying to work and all of those other things. But, there was really I was having a lot of really bad symptoms and it just wasn't something that sat well with me and something that I knew wasn't normal for me and something that I, knew, somewhere deep down that it was worth looking into more. I was having really bad episodes of heart palpitations and panic attacks and really severe anxiety and all sorts of awful things. And it took me several years before I finally thought, okay, well, I've already changed my diet, I've changed my exercise habits, I've seen all these specialists, I've had all of these tests done. Everything about me seems to be normal. So the only common factor here seems to be the pill. And that's the only thing that I really haven't changed in the amount of time that I've been having all these symptoms. So I kind of decided on my own that, being an engineer and being pretty scientifically inclined, doing experiments was something I was pretty familiar with. So I decided that I wanted to, do a little more self-experimentation and stop taking the pill and see if that helped. And again, it was actually going against the recommendations of my doctor at the time. But, something that I was so desperate, to figure out what was going on that I was pretty much willing to try anything. And I stopped taking it. And it, within a few weeks, my symptoms started to subside. And within probably about a month or 6 weeks, they were completely gone. And I was totally convinced that the pill was something that my body was just not meant to handle. And during this time, I was actually put on several different pills, so it wasn't something that was just specific to the one pill that I was taking, which is something that, a lot of women are told by doctors, oh, well, if you're having trouble with this one, we'll try switching you to another formulation to see if that helps. But for me, that wasn't the case, and my body was just reacting really badly to it. And it took me a long time to figure out that that was what was causing it. But once I did, I was pretty set on finding something else. So once I finished, once I decided to stop taking the pill, I was pretty terrified about my dysmenorrhea and my horrible cramps coming back because that was the reason I went on it in the first place. So there was a lot of internal struggle going on there that I had to figure out how to deal with. So
Yeah, I can totally. Well, I can't say totally, but I can relate because I wasn't on the birth control pill as long as you were. I was on it for a few years, probably like something like 2 to 3 years when I was really young. Same thing. I went to the doctor with painful periods, like excruciating, ridiculous, like just terrible. Um, and then, of course, the doctor put me on the pill. Um, and kind of same thing as you, like I kind of had this feeling like it just probably wasn't good for my body, but I didn't experience all of the negative side effects that you did. And what struck me when you were talking was that you went through all of these changes, like you changed your diet, like you said, you changed all these other things in your life, but yet still you were having all these issues. And then you went off the pill and those things kind of subsided relatively quickly. That's a really powerful statement because it's like it's kind of, have you the book that's come out recently, Sweetening the Pill?
Hmm.
Um, and she kind of talks about like how it's the last thing you would expect. So people are changing all these things about their lives, but the pill would be the last thing they would expect would be causing all those problems.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that I found really interesting about my experience was that, I was pretty much grew up thinking like that's what people did when, that's what women did when they had issues, and that was the quick fix, and that's, this magic little pill that fixes everything. And it was something that was part of my life for so long that I kind of just became immune to the things that I was experiencing. And, it didn't ever occur to me that that could be causing any issues that I was experiencing. So, yeah, it was definitely kind of I had, I guess, a sort of awakening when I finally realized, like, oh my goodness, this is what's been causing all of these things. How could I have not seen it before?
Yeah. I just hope that with, as more information comes out, as more women kind of have experiences of coming off of the pill and, just more experiences like that kind of getting out there. And also the knowledge that you can actually do things to address the problem of the painful periods. Because being that that's one of the things I struggle with as well. It's just like you said about that kind of anxiety of going off of it because it's coming back and now you have to deal with it, right? Because you're not going on it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about because I know you mentioned that when you first went off the pill and you were kind of toying with the fertility awareness method that you were extra scared to try to actually use it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that process was and how you kind of overcame your fear of being off the pill and using fertility awareness.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely a scary thing because, I had spent all of these years relying on this pill to do everything for me, and I didn't have to know anything about my body or, the way that it functioned. That it was honestly, it was pretty terrifying once to even consider the idea of, listening to my body in order to figure out when I'm fertile and when I'm not fertile, and, when to avoid unprotected sex and things like that. Yeah, it was an extremely terrifying place to be, but which is one of the reasons that I spent so much time researching it because um, with the background in engineering, I feel like I probably overdo it with the scientific method a little bit sometimes. But I just felt like it was something that I really wanted to understand and have a really good foundation before I decided to use it or any other method for that matter. Because I didn't want to make the same mistake again. So I didn't want to find something that I, regretted down the road. So I wanted to put a lot of time into understanding the method. So once I did, I was actually really, really confident in it. And I really didn't have I didn't second guess myself after I decided, this is the method for me. This is what is going to work for me and my body. And I was super confident after I made that decision. And I think, coming to finding that place of confidence was really just about finally getting an understanding of how my body worked and the fact that women can't get pregnant every single day of the menstrual cycle. And, there's certain things that have to happen for pregnancy to occur. And there's certain things that you can look for to figure out if a pregnancy can occur on any given day. And that was really powerful information. And really, it changed everything about me, not just my sex life, not just my, how I felt about my body, but it changed every aspect of my life. I found that I have so much more confidence in other areas of my life because of this. And it was pretty profound experience.
Yeah, I can totally relate because it's kind of hard to put into words, but when you kind of learn about how your body works and you kind of get rid of that being afraid of getting pregnant all the time, you're right. Like, it does change more aspects of your life than you would think. I mean, you kind of enter it with the whole like, oh, this is just a birth control method. It's really cool. But once you actually learn about it, it really does change your life in ways that you would never think. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about as well. So you mentioned the excruciating pain and vomiting and diarrhea with every period. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you dealt with that when you went off the pill. Did it come roaring back when you first stopped taking the pill?
So it actually took a few months before it really, I guess, returned in full force. But it was something that I was expecting and, had started somewhat mentally preparing for. And, I did my research ahead of time to figure out what I could do and supplements that I could take. And, something that a lot of women don't realize is that there is also, a period of time when you do come off, when there's all of these, symptoms that you're experiencing because you stopped the pill, because your body was, your endocrine system was kind of like taking a little nap while you were on the pill for, the last decade. So it takes a while for your body to kickstart itself again and kickstart hormone production. So yeah, it did take a few months for all of that to come back, but it did. And with a vengeance. So that definitely wasn't fun. And that was one of my biggest reservations to stopping the pill in the first place. But having to face that again really forced me to think critically about things that I could do in my life to improve my hormone health. So I figured out that, I have hormone imbalance, and, dysmenorrhea is often caused by estrogen dominance and, low progesterone levels and things like that, and stuff that I never would have thought about before. And, the fact that coming off the pill, a lot of women are deficient in vitamin B, and, taking supplements can help improve your hormone health, and, just changing what you eat and eating more leafy greens and things like that. So it definitely took a lot of trial and error for me to figure out what worked for me, as far as managing my dysmenorrhea. And it's still something that I do struggle with. Like, I definitely have months where I kind of fall off the bandwagon as far as eating well, and I just eat, awful food, and, don't exercise as much as I should, and then I pay for it at the end of the month. But it's really good motivation to keep myself healthy, and, it's a really good gauge of where my hormone health is and where my overall health is, when I can, feel the changes and see the changes each cycle. It's really keeps me in check and really keeps me focused on what is important, which is, just maintaining my overall health and living as well as I can. So,
yeah, I think one of the great takeaways, like I'd hope for anyone listening to the podcast, would be that that if you do have painful periods, that's an indication of a problem. Because there seems to be this idea out there that it's just a normal part of periods to be in excruciating pain every month. It's kind of just out there, and then it helps them to sell us Advil. Because I know for me, I had to take Advil every single time I had my period. And it was like I had a window. And if I didn't take the Advil in the window, I was on the floor for like 4 hours.
I know that very well.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrifying. And I struggled with it for several years after going off the pill. I tried all kinds of different things. And I think the only thing that really changed it for me was it was kind of like a shift in mindset. I was kind
Hmm.
of always looking for a thing, like, okay, if I take evening primrose oil or if I do this or if I do that, then maybe it'll be better. But what ended up really improving it was actually just a kind of overhaul of diet.
Yeah, so I definitely went through that as well. So when I first came off the pill, I was taking evening primrose. I had like a whole bucket full of different supplements that I was taking, which is probably the worst way to go because if something does help, you have no idea which one is helping.
Totally relate to
So
that.
yeah, I learned that that lesson pretty quickly. But yeah, it was really just finding, coming to a place where I understand that everything that I do to my body has an effect on my cycles, and every stress in my life, whether that be mental stress or physical stress or emotional stress, has an effect on my cycle because everything in your body, every system in your body is so closely interlinked. And once I kind of came to that understanding, it became so much easier for me to manage all of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things with charting because just like you kind of alluded to, if you eat kind of crappy or say like if you go out and you have a bunch of drinks or whatever a couple days in a row, you often kind of see a reflection of that in your charts, whether that's the mucus quality or even the length of your cycle or whatever it is, or the heaviness of your menstrual cramps. But it's really interesting because when you're charting, it gives you this newfound appreciation of your body and how everything, just like you said, how everything that you do has an impact. And for all the negative stuff about your menstrual period and all that kind of stuff that's floating around in the media, I feel like it's an important reminder because you didn't think about it and you would never have thought that you had a hormonal imbalance or anything like that when you were on the pill, because when you're on the pill, you're just kind of on autopilot. And so even a horribly painful period, it's like a messenger. It's like your body's way of saying like, hey, there's something wrong. Do something, fix it.
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite things about charting too is that you do get that almost like instant feedback. So you get like it's basically like a real-time data stream. And that was so helpful for me, especially when I was coming off the pill. I started charting pretty much right away, and it was so cool for me to be able to watch my cycles regulate, like watch my periods come back and, watch my cervical fluid pattern emerge and my temperature shifts start happening and, just really seeing like my body weaning itself off the pill and coming out of autopilot and starting to regulate itself again was so cool to me.
Yeah. When you make different changes in your diet or when you try different things, when you want to experiment on yourself, you can totally kind of see what's working. I mean, as long as you're not doing everything at one time, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So, I mean, maybe we can get into the Groove charting app a little bit because obviously that was part of your journey as well. So, where did that fall into it? When did you decide to create a charting app? Like, how awesome is that?
So that idea kind of formulated pretty soon after I stopped taking the pill, which was, I mean, it's been probably 2.5 years now since I stopped taking it. And Groove kind of came about because I had all of this information in my brain that was kind of just, exploding, and I wanted to tell every single person that I met about it, and, was so frustrated that this wasn't something that, that this information wasn't something that I was taught in sex ed in elementary school, and that this method of birth control isn't something that's ever talked about and is something that's associated with the rhythm method. And there are just all of these ideas in my head and all of these things that I wanted to do. And, spreading this information became so, so important to me because I knew that, you know, I knew that there was no way that I was the only woman on the planet who was struggling with the pill and, could benefit from using this method. So it kind of became my personal mission tell other women about it and try to help other women, have a find the method that's right for them, even if it isn't necessarily fertility awareness. I wanted to help enlighten women and teach women about their bodies. So, yeah, the concept of Groove came pretty soon after I stopped the pill and had already done all of this research on fertility awareness and was super, super pumped about it. And there were a few apps out there and, things online that women were using to chart all of these things, but I just wasn't really, I tried pretty much every single one of them out there and was never satisfied with the user interface or the design or the information in the app. There was always something missing for me. So, I kind of just, it was actually my boyfriend who was like, well, maybe you should build an app. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. And, that's how it ended up happening. So, but yeah, it has been a really crazy journey, but I am so thrilled to help other women. And if, it's so exciting to get feedback on Groove and hear about women who love the app and, it's helped them, be more confident with their bodies. And that's so incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, is when I started charting, it was probably around the year 2000 or maybe even 2001. And back in the day when I got all excited about it, I mean, I created like an actual physical book and I was selling it to all my friends, like talking to everybody who I knew when I was in university. But it was around the time when maybe I just wasn't cool, but honestly, maybe I'm dating myself, but I only got my first cell phone when I was in university. Like I didn't have one in high school. So in my brain at that time, there was no concept of an app or anything like that. So when I was looking for apps to chart my cycle, I'm trying to think of when that was, but maybe around like 2005, 2006, there just really, like you said, was not anything really good. Like I remember using an app, but I kind of hated it. I just was using it because I needed just something. So now with the Groove app and with the Kindara app, there's like, and Justice has an app as well. But now there's finally some awesome options for women wanting to chart that have much better functionality and, like you said, a much more user-friendly interface with a lot more information.
Yeah. And with the apps, like, comes I feel like this new wave of enlightenment where women are finding out about this and realizing, like, oh, the pill isn't the only thing that I can use, which is so awesome. Like, I obviously, like, these other apps are competition, but I have so much respect for them. And, like, I feel like we would all be really good friends if we knew each other just because we're all on the same mission. And it's really, really incredible.
Well, I actually think the more apps and the more women doing this for other women, the better. Because, I mean, the percentage of women who even know about the fertility awareness method, I feel, is still very, very small. And there's just only room to grow.
It is, and yeah, that's what's so exciting about it is because I just feel it coming. I feel, all of these women in the future flocking to this, and I'm so excited about that. And I'm really excited to be part of what I hope is a really powerful movement.
Well, I totally wanted to delve into that a little bit more. And I just wanted to, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the functionalities that you did put in Groove and how the Groove app is different to a lot of those other period calculator apps that are out there.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the biggest things that we decided to focus on was just the design of the app because there's, so many period trackers and fertility trackers out there that I used, and I, just absolutely loathe the design, pink and frilly, and there's something about it that just like made me cringe every time I looked at it, and I just, I wanted a better experience. I wanted to give women a better experience and wanted to give women an app that, they could use and, be proud using and not have to, have a little twitch every time they opened it because they hated the way it looked. So that was our biggest thing. So we spent so much time on the design of the app, and it made it really easy to actually design out the features because I was a customer. So I basically built an app that I would want to use and that I would be really proud to use. And I'm really excited about the functionality we have. And, you know, one of the big things that actually took a long time to design was the temperature entry. So, because I am one of those people who I set an alarm every morning, you know, obnoxiously early to wake myself up and take my temperature, and then I enter it into the app and go back to sleep. Um, just to for the sake of consistency. So, you know, trying to fumble with my phone and like scroll through numbers in the app, you know, at 5:30 in the morning when I was half asleep was just the worst thing in the world to me. So we spent so much time working on a temperature interface that would be really, really easy and really elegant and really clean. So I was really proud of that. And one of the other things I think that sets us apart is just, you know, the design of our chart. So regular fertility awareness charts, you know, if you chart on paper, you have a different place to enter temperature and a different place to enter cervical fluid secretions. But we really wanted women to be able to just glance at their chart and know exactly what was going on and not have to, you know, try to work to figure out like, okay, this is what my fluid's doing today and this is where my temperature is today. We wanted everything to be very well incorporated. So we actually created a bar graph. So the height of the chart, the height of the graph of each data point is the temperature and the color is the fluid secretion. So we really just wanted, we wanted women to, you know, we didn't want women to have to work to figure out what was going on because there's already a big enough barrier to entry for this method. So we wanted to create something that was really, really visually appealing and really simple to use. So I think that's one of the biggest things that sets us apart, in addition to the fact that we decided to create an app that women could use just for cycle tracking if that's what they wanted to use. So you can, you know, women who you know, don't want to use the fertility awareness method, like we're totally okay with them having that decision, you know, bodily autonomy for the win. So we created an app that could also just act as a basic period tracker. And then we wanted to give women the option of being able to switch to fertility charting if and when they learn more about it and decide that that's the right method for them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely awesome. And as a customer, as a user, I definitely appreciate having, like you said, the everything kind of on top of each other. I mean, having used the paper chart, it's different when you have a piece of paper because then it's all there. But when you have an app, you'd have to scroll up and down to see the whole thing. And so having everything kind of right there, just like you said, to make it easier is perfect for a user like me because then it's all right there and you can see like right away your cervical pattern, everything. And it also kind of enforces the fertility awareness method because when you first learn about it, there's all these different things that you're watching for, but what it really is a cycle. And all of these things are kind of happening around the same time. So it makes sense to have an app that has everything right there, kind of right in real time, and so you don't have to search for everything. So
Exactly. And, you know, there's all of these, like some people focus on temperature, like, well, temperature is when you ovulate and cervical fluid is when you're fertile. But, you know, what we really want women to focus on is, like you said, just the overall cycle and, you know, the marrying of these two things and how each of these things like helps to determine your fertile window. So we wanted it to be really easy to determine when your fertile window is, and instead of having to, you know, scan the chart and figure out, okay, well, my cervical fluid is way over here, so this is the beginning of my fertile window, and my temperature is way over here, and this is the end of my fertile window. So we wanted to, you know, just make that more seamless. So just make it a little bit nicer to look at and a little bit easier to figure out what's going on with your cycle.
yeah, and it's such a big difference when what I've noticed anyways, when an app is created by people with the fertility awareness method in mind, I feel like when the app is created with that in mind, it's just so much better for the purpose. I mean, of course it would be, because then of course you're thinking about it in that way, but it's a completely different thing than a period tracker. So, I mean, I would say that even if you're looking for a period tracker, using an app like Groove is even way better just for that, because I mean, some people might like that pink frilly stuff, but I'm a grown woman.
Yeah, it's not for me. So I wanted to with our period tracker, and I feel like one of the other things that I noticed back when I was using an app just for period tracking was that there was just all of these things that I needed to enter. So they were asking me about like my mood and, how I was feeling today and, breast tenderness and all of these things. And I was like, yeah, I mean, those things are useful to track, but I really just want to give women, the kind of just the bare necessities. Like these are the things that women who use period trackers really want to see. So they want to know like when they can expect their next period and like when they're experiencing mucus and when, what their bleeding is doing and what, their like if they have any like general symptoms that they need to track. But besides that, I feel like there was just a lot of fluff with a lot of the other apps that I wanted to trim down, just to make the experience a little bit more pleasant. So
Yeah. And I feel like the notes functionality like is sufficient. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with tracking all that stuff, but everyone's different. Maybe I want to track my breast tenderness, but you want to track your mood.
that was one of
So,
the other things that drove me, bananas was, there were apps that were asking me about ovulation predictor kits and, whether I took a pregnancy test. And I was like, well, those things aren't relevant to me. So I don't need to see all of that information. If, it's kind of a turnoff when, I'm trying to use this app to avoid pregnancy, but you're asking me if I'm using ovulation predictor kits and taking pregnancy tests every month. So that was one of the other things that I wanted to keep in mind. So actually in one of the we're working on a big update for Groove that's going to actually make the app highly customized to each individual woman. So whether she wants to get pregnant or avoid pregnancy or track her cycles, it'll take into consideration if she recently stopped the pill, if she is using fertility awareness method. It'll take all of these different things into consideration, whether she has regular or irregular cycles, and it's going to customize all of the information in the app based on that information so that each woman is going to have a very customized experience and they can learn about their specific body and all of the things that they can expect during their cycles, which I'm super super excited about.
yeah, that sounds amazing. I love that. I just love that this is getting out there more. It just makes me so happy. And yeah, I when I found the Groove app and when I kind of saw what you're doing, I just think it's absolutely awesome. And so that's definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to have a chat with you, because I just think you're doing awesome work, and just to put it out there more, because every woman doesn't need to use fertility awareness. Everyone is different, and it's obviously not going to be for everybody, but I do think that everyone should have the opportunity to learn how their body works. I mean, just that in and of itself, every woman should have the opportunity to learn how your body works. You don't have to use the method, but the knowledge, I mean, why not? I learned a lot about my eyes and my ears in biology class, so.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm really advocating for is just not even necessarily everybody learning how to use the method, but just learning the foundation, like the reproductive science and, the female reproductive anatomy and physiology that is the foundation of this method, I think is so, so important. And can really help improve the self-confidence of young girls growing up, which is such a huge issue today, like women growing up hating their bodies and thinking that their bodies are super mysterious and unreliable is so problematic. And I think that the fertility awareness method can really help to solve a lot of those issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like that teenage time, I mean, when you're a teenager, you're not necessarily trying to get pregnant when you're 16. So you don't have the stress of that. And not every 15-year-old is having sex. So you may not even have the stress of that. I feel like it's the perfect time to actually learn the fertility awareness
It,
method.
it is. And I feel like a lot of what's currently taught just about the menstrual cycle is basically like, when girls ask, well, why do I have my period? The answer is usually so you can have a baby someday, which is not relevant when you're, a 9-year-old. So it's not something that is engaging for kids. And I feel like reframing it and putting it in terms of these are the things that are happening in your body, and these are all of the ways that it'll affect, the way that you're feeling, and all of these other things in your body is so much more powerful of a message for young girls.
Absolutely. And I feel like the message as well, like in addition to the fact that it's not relevant for you right now, is it also sets every woman up to go on the pill.
It,
For so many reasons. I mean, I went on the pill for pain. I've never actually used the pill for birth control. So like, ironically, I was probably one of the only women who, when I actually needed birth control, that was around the time that I was going off the pill for other reasons. So, I mean, there's so many women out there using it for all these different reasons, but if you have that foundational belief that your period doesn't serve a purpose and it's just bad and painful and all of those negative ideas, then, it just sets you right up to go on the pill, because then you can essentially get rid of your period until you're ready to have kids.
exactly. And yeah, that's one of the other things that I talk about in my book is just the effect that advertising and the media has in all of this, and how big of an effect the messages that we receive as women affect the way that we view our periods and feel about our bodies. And I think that like one of the things that I talk about in my book is the fact that, I think fertility awareness can help overcome a lot of that.
Well, one of the things that I really liked when you were talking about in your book, in addition to talking about how the media plays into the negative views about menstruation, even the way that menstrual products are kind of pushed and, I guess, advertised. I thought maybe if you wanted to talk a little bit about how menstrual products kind of play into that whole media bashing of the period in general.
Yeah, I feel like they play, a huge, huge effect. So one of the things that I talk about in my book is just the fact that, and I think man or woman, like everybody is familiar with the fact that menstrual commercials or advertisements never use red liquid. It's always this like weird blue stuff that they pour on the pad, or, soak the tampon in to show how absorbent it is. And, as a kid, that's so confusing. You don't understand what the product is for. And maybe that's the point. I don't know. But, I didn't know what those products were for. And I feel like this just sends kids a really confusing message. It doesn't set young girls up to understand what's going on and to be comfortable with their bodies when, they can't even show the right color fluid that the products are meant to absorb. So that's one thing that's, I think really problematic. And one of the other really big ones is the language that menstrual hygiene companies use when they're advertising their products. So tampons are made to be very discreet. So you see discreet on all of the packaging. They make them smaller so that and advertise in commercials that, the guys in your class will just think it's a piece of candy, lol. Like nobody will know what it is. Nobody will know you're on your period. And that's one of the biggest things is that, these marketing and advertising pushes about menstrual products is how discreet they are and how nobody will know that you're on your period. And I feel like there's this whole message that's centered around women hiding the fact that they're menstruating, even though, at any given time, about 25% of the female population is menstruating. So the fact that like we have to hide this part of our bodies all the time is just so shameful, and it really has an effect on the way you feel about your body. And the fact that we grow up, thinking that menstruation is gross. And I remember being younger and hearing, all these messages from my mom and people in my family right after I started my period for the first time, oh, it's this natural part of life. And you learn in school that it's this natural part of life. But then all of these messages that you're hearing from the media and in advertisements and on tampon boxes and pad boxes, or that all of this stuff is made to be discreet so that nobody will know that you're menstruating, and nobody ever talks about it. So it's just really confusing to get all of those messages at the same time. So as a kid, you're like, okay, well, it's normal, but so why am I not allowed to talk about it? It's normal and natural and healthy, but I have to hide it. So I feel like there's just these really conflicting messages, and it's very confusing, and it has a huge impact on the way women feel about our bodies, and it, turns menstruation into this shameful thing that we feel like we need to hide, which is awful. It's something that's such a huge part of the human experience. That's the way that we reproduce, is because women have menstrual cycles, and the fact that that's a shameful thing is just super disappointing to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then also just how it's unsanitary, dirty, sanitary napkin. I mean,
And
anyone who survived junior high, the poor girl that ever had a little bit of blood seep through.
oh my gosh,
I mean, it's just you're traumatized, and yeah, like, and so basically you devote your life to making sure that no one knows you ever like no one knows you ever menstruating. And sometimes you kind of get that sense people don't even want to touch the box, and
yeah,
it's just so dirt, like. And then there's obviously cultural like ramifications, different practices when women are on their periods. There's certain things they're not allowed to do, certain places they're not allowed to go, and those types of things play into it as well.
yeah, for sure. And that's one of the other things I talked about in my book is just religious practices. And obviously, like, practicing any religion is totally fine, and I would never condone that people not practice a religion for a certain reason. But it is problematic, and it's not just one religion. There's so many religions that say that menstruating women are dirty and have to be confined to this certain place and can't touch anything. And there's myths that menstruating women will make plants die if they touch them. And there's all of these things that are so problematic. And then that coupled with all of the feminine hygiene products like the sprays and the wipes that are supposed to get rid of odors, and douching and all of these other things that make women just feel like their vaginas and their entire reproductive system is just this shameful, disgusting thing. And it's awful. Like, I grew up with a huge disdain for my period, and feeling super self-conscious constantly, even when I was just by myself, about do I smell weird? Like, you just grow up with all of these different messages and end up hating your body, and it's just so confusing.
Yeah, and I can relate to some of the things that you were talking about earlier with regards to the blue liquid, like whatever that is, because I don't know if you ever have this experience, but I mean, my periods have historically been extremely heavy in addition to being extremely painful. And sometimes it wasn't just liquid, right? You know what I mean? And so it's kind of that same thing you were talking about. Like, you kind of think you're a weirdo. You kind of think there's something wrong with you because I don't have any blue liquid coming out of me. And to make matters worse, I never really found tampons or pads to be useful. Tampons, I found them to leak, and I found them to be extremely uncomfortable. Some of them expand lengthwise, and so you could feel them when they were expanding. And pads, I just always found to be just uncomfortable, and they kind of feel like, you just feel kind of wet, and everyone's different. But
Exactly.
it wasn't until I discovered the Diva Cup, and the Diva Cup was created by women, right? By women for women type of thing. And it wasn't until I started using the Diva Cup, I'm like, okay, this actually works for what I have. I have a period. I don't have blue liquid. And this Diva Cup actually operates for what I actually have coming out of me. It helps
I
and it
know.
works.
And it's, seems like it shouldn't be this novel thing to have menstrual products created by women, if it's for women. But like, I feel like menstrual cups were that. They were so like revolutionary that, a woman created a product for women, which is so funny to think about. But yeah, it's just really interesting. You talking about pads and tampons being uncomfortable reminded me of something else that I talked about, touched on in the book, which is, just the fact that those products make women really uncomfortable with their flow because, a tampon is inserted usually with an applicator, so women don't ever have to come into physical contact with their body. And then you just pull it out and immediately throw it away. And it's the same with pads. You just pull it off and throw it in the garbage, and you never have to touch any of your menstrual fluid. You never have to come in contact with your body to use any of those products. And while that's super great for a lot of women, like I know there's a lot of women who are on the squeamish side, which there's nothing wrong with that. You know, using a menstrual cup really helped me kind of learn about my body. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that this is what my menstrual fluid looked like. This is fascinating. And it was just so interesting to me to, you know, kind of become more in touch with myself in that way and learn about, okay, well, this is what my fluid looks like, and this is how much I'm bleeding, and, you know, all of these things that I never really had a grasp on before.
Well, and exactly what you said about how much, for me, as I mentioned, my periods were always really heavy. And so using the Diva Cup allowed me to see how heavy. And that is also one of the things that showed me how problematic it was. So it's kind of like a way to gauge your health in kind of indirectly, because since I've gone through kind of cleaning up my diet and I've had just amazing improvements in my menstrual cycle. I mean, the last several cycles I've had no pain for the past year or so. And all I can tell you is it's like, it feels like a miracle.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, like I pinch myself. Like I wouldn't shut up about it. Like I'm telling like everyone I know, like, oh my goodness, I had periods without pain, and also not as much. And I can actually tell that the amount has gone down based on, you know, how much I see in the Diva Cup, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the times when my period starts and I like don't even notice, I just feel like I just hear like angels singing because it's so wonderful. And I never thought that that was a possibility for me. So it's so exciting.
Well, I think we're kind of getting towards the end. There's one more question that I kind of wanted to get to before I do my final few questions for the podcast. But I recently read this article, and you may have read it as well, and it was called The Paradox of Crunchy Women and Chemical Birth Control. And I really love, I don't know if you read that article, but I really loved it because what it's talking about is like we have this whole movement where we're eating organic food and we're trying to be healthy and we're exercising and, you know, maybe we're even meditating. We're doing all this stuff. We're going to yoga, like, you know what I mean? We're doing all this stuff, but we're still on the pill. And so I thought that article was really interesting, but you kind of touched on the same kind of idea in your book, that there's kind of this whole shift happening towards more natural alternatives in general in our culture. And maybe you could just kind of talk a little bit about how the fertility awareness method fits in perfectly with this, like the last thing that women are not willing to give up. They're doing all of these changes, but the pill is like the thing that we're not really willing to give up.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. So one of the things that I hear from women pretty frequently is, you know, women who decide to stop taking the pill, you know, say, well, for the longest time, I, you know, was eating organic meat because I didn't want to eat meat that had hormones in it. But then I was putting all of these synthetic hormones in my body every day when I took the pill, and which really doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so there, like you said, I mentioned this in my book, but there's this big movement happening right now where if you walk into, you know, almost any grocery store, even Walmart, the Walmarts of the world, if you walk in, there's, you know, a huge variety of organic produce and organic products and natural this and natural that and hormone-free meat. And, you know, people are becoming much more conscientious of the things that they put in their bodies and the chemicals that are in their cleaning products, and consumers are becoming much smarter and they're demanding better products. And, you know, to me, it makes perfect sense that birth control and the pharmaceutical industry is, you know, going to be next in that shift. People shifting away from using pharmaceuticals to fix problems that can be fixed via diet and alternative methods. And fertility awareness fits so perfectly into that because, you know, you are becoming more in tune with your body, and, you know, you're using something that's not hard on the environment and it's not hard on your endocrine system, and it's, you know, not causing any long-term damage to your body, the way that the pill has, you know, still up for debate, but, you know, a lot of studies show that it does. Um, and yeah, it just makes so much sense that fertility awareness is going to, you know, come alongside this shift that we're seeing in natural living.
Well, I totally agree. And I feel like one of the reasons as well is because it works. One of the reasons it's natural and it's, when used correctly, more effective than the pill. Because studies have shown that when it's used perfectly, 99.6% effectiveness is more effective than the pill. And I really feel that I feel that women just don't feel like they have any options. It's birth control pill, patch, shot, but whatever type of hormonal birth control or nothing. I think that as women learn that actually you do have another alternative, yeah, it's a little crunchy, but it actually works and it's actually effective. And I feel
Exactly.
like once women it's almost like we have to regain confidence in our own bodies because we've been told for so many years that we shouldn't really even think about our bodies. We should just push it all under the rug and just forget about it and ignore it.
And that's so true. And, one of the things that I find so appealing about the method is like, yeah, on the surface it is a little bit crunchy, but when you think about it, it's really not because everything about the method is has a very firm foundation in science, which is what drew me to the method in the first place because I'm a huge like science nerd, like went to school for engineering, very analytically driven. And it's so firmly based in, what science, like what research has shown about, female reproductive anatomy and the way that the female physiology works, that, there's a very scientific reason why it's so effective. And yeah, at the surface it is crunchy, but I feel like it can have appeal if we can just get past the fact that it is quote unquote natural and that natural things are deemed inferior for whatever reason.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so to wrap up today's show, there's three questions that I've been asking towards the end. And so the first one is, what would you say is one of the most common myths or misunderstandings about the fertility awareness method?
The biggest one that I hear is, well, isn't that the same thing as the rhythm method? I'm sure everybody says that when you ask at the end of the podcast, but that's the most common thing that I hear. Oh, that's like the rhythm method, right? No, it's actually very different than the rhythm method. I think most people just associate natural birth control, think that that's not anything natural is the same thing as the rhythm method, which it's not at all. And, I just like hammer that into people as much as I can. But that I feel like that's one of the biggest hurdles to get over with the method is people just mistaking it for the rhythm method, which is, as we know, not extremely effective.
Yeah, it's kind of like not having a method because
Exactly.
unless you're a machine and your cycles are exactly the same every month, it's not necessarily going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not a machine. My cycles have gone through many changes over the years, so I know for a fact that it wouldn't work for me. So, yeah, definitely one of the most common myths about the fertility awareness method. So, for any of our listeners who might be currently on the pill or the patch or some sort of hormonal contraceptive and they're considering coming off, they don't want to have kids right now, but maybe they do want to have kids at some point in the next 2 to 3 years. What advice, if any, would you give to them?
I think the biggest thing that I would tell women is just learn about your body. Even if you decide, even if you're thinking about stopping the pill and you decide that this method isn't right for you, the worst thing it's going to do is make you more self-confident, which is obviously a really amazing thing. So, yeah, just learn about how your body works. Read my book or read Tony Weschler's awesome book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Just learn about how your body works and, become more self-aware and more body literate and more self-confident, even if you decide that this method isn't right for you. Just make that decision from a place of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's great. And then for any of our listeners who are actually at the point where they're considering using the fertility awareness method as birth control, but they're scared of making that leap because, of course, we're all scared that as soon as you go off the pill, you'll get pregnant like that month. So what would you tell them, I guess, any words of encouragement?
It's not as scary as you think it is. first of all. I feel like that, may not be helpful. But, something that I would suggest women doing if you have come off the pill or if you haven't come off the pill, just start with the checks. Start taking your temperature every day, start checking your cervical fluid every day. Just get into the habit of doing these things so, you have an understanding of, how to do all this stuff and you're more self-confident. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too is that, there's so many women out there that can help you, which I think a lot of women making this decision feel really alone. And I know that I did. But social media, which when it first started becoming a thing, I absolutely hated it. But now I'm the biggest advocate because there are these amazing communities on social media for any woman who's interested in learning more about this or needs help or needs words of encouragement. There's this amazing community of people out there who have used it and are willing to help and willing to talk and willing to calm your nerves. And I think having a community is so important, and just don't feel alone because you're not alone.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel that when you're learning this method, I feel that it's best to do it it's best to not do it by yourself. Because I know I didn't even learn by myself. I actually was really fortunate. There was a group of women within my community who were teaching it and who were doing it. And I just started going to meetings and I just kept showing up to the point that I became a volunteer. And then I started training and teaching other women. But just being around the community, like you said, and it doesn't have to be an actual physical community because there's so many, like you said, communities online. So I think that's absolutely awesome advice. And I think that women do learn better in that setting with the support of other women. So Jennifer, for any of the listeners that would like to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to find you?
So I am on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is Aldoretta. For anybody who wants to send me a tweet, you can find me if you visit Groove's website. We have contact information on there as well. And I'm always happy to answer emails. So you can email Groove's account, howdyatreadytogroove.com. I'm always super pumped to get emails from people and spread my knowledge any way that I can. So I would say Twitter's probably the best, but yeah, email too. But I love talking to women about this. So any questions, bring them on.
Okay, well, I will make sure to include all of those ways to contact you in the show notes for today's episode. So thanks again, Jennifer. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was fantastic chatting with you. And I'm so glad that you're doing the work you're doing. So keep it up. Don't stop. I think you're doing amazing work for women all over the place.
Well, thank you. You as well. Was super pumped to be part of the podcast, and always love meeting other people and connecting with other people who are as passionate about this as I am, and it's really great to be part of the community. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So for all the listeners, thank you so much for listening. You're awesome. And you made it all the way to the end of today's podcast. So that's awesome too. And I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tweet me at Fertile Friday or stop by the blog and leave a comment. So you'll find today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/Jennifer. And you can find the show notes for all of our podcast episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. You can also find me on my Facebook page. So the Fertility Friday Facebook page is facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. So until next time, be well and happy charting.